Hello and welcome to the preview show. We'll be talking about the Southampton game at the weekend, talking about, how our season's gone, how Southampton's season's gone. We're discussing all of that in the game at the weekend. Won't you join us today?
The Leicester City machine is on the march again.
Leicester Fan TV presents a variety of content like fan discussions, match analysis, and engaging with Leicester fans worldwide. We want your views live, thanks to our sponsors, Everard's, Pucker Pies, Hologram, Take Me, Newbie & Co, and the Fox's Arms.
Want to watch more content like this? Hit the like button. Give us your views. Hit subscribe to Leicester Fan TV and make sure to follow Leicester Fan TV on all socials.
Hello and welcome to the preview show. We'll be discussing the Southampton game. It is a massive game after the international break against Southampton. Will we get 3 points and be 6 points clear of the relegation zone, or will we lose? And we'll be in the thick of it with Southampton again. To join me, I'll be adding in Simon. Is someone ready to join? Good evening, Simon.
Hello, Jonno. How are you, mate?
Not bad yourself?
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Had a good international break?
Yeah, it always seems like it goes on forever a little bit, doesn't it, when your team's not playing? But it'll be good to get back to the league again this weekend. And I guess, like most Leicester fans, I'm hoping for something from Southampton at the weekend.
That's it. Like we ended the before the break with a win against Bournemouth, and it wasn't an easy win. Some say we're lucky to win it, but a win is a win, and we're hoping to build on that. So, do you think? Are you confident going to the Southampton game, or are you a bit nervous? Or
yeah, I mean, like you just said, we didn't resoundingly beat Bournemouth. We dictated the game in the first half. Personally, I felt Bournemouth pretty much dictated the game in the second half, and we did everything we could to keep them out and got away with it. In the end, a win's a win. We desperately needed one, but with these games coming up now against the teams around us, we've got to start to dictate, in my opinion, a little bit more to the opposition and start to pick up some points to get ourselves out of trouble.
That's it. Like it's all about getting that momentum, and I think with the players we've got, I think Leicester fans are more optimistic than other seasons. I think in other teams around the bottom, their teams are. I think we've got a very good squad in terms of being competitive. Like we've not got players we think are quite dull. I think we've got players like Fatara, who's very eager to impress. We've got obviously Vardy as a veteran. So we've got players I think that can make the difference. So do you think if you were to give our season a rating out of 10, what would you give it so far?
Yeah, Jonno, it's one of those where obviously we won the championship last season. We go into the season having had previous Premier League seasons, obviously apart from the relegation season where we were top half team, and I think there's an expectation from quite a chunk of our fan base to kind of resume that type of scenario. But the squad we've got now and the scenario really is completely different to that of 4 years ago. So, I was never a massive fan of Cooper when we took him on as manager. I feel like he's been a little bit passive in games at times since the season's begun. I think we could probably be a little bit more aggressive and dictate games a bit more and go for the throat a bit more. However, if we end up finishing in the position we're in right now, I think all of us would take that and run. So I don't know, 4 or 5 out of 10. Jonno, what about you? What's your thoughts?
I'll say a 5. I think Cooper. I think everyone was very quick to judge Cooper. I think with the games we've had Arsenal, Spurs, Villa. Those 3 games alone, everyone pretty much put us to lose anyway. And to give Arsenal a very good game, as well as Southampton did, ironically, and to draw against Spurs was very impressive. So I think with the opposition we've had, we've not just gone down on the whim and lost 6-0 each time. We've given a massive fight, and I've been quite impressed with some of it, but I do agree we need to be more attacking. We need to see more consistency. I want to see a style of play that's consistent, not kind of random. I want to see a consistent form like Spurs. They play high line attacking football, but they do that every single week. They may lose games, but they do that the same thing. I want us to have a similar way of, right, we've got a style, we're sticking with it, win or lose, but we want to stick with it. But this isn't just about a Leicester show. We're going to bring in a Southampton fan, just like us, came up to the Premier League last season, got promoted. Thankfully, it wasn't Leeds, but I'm going to bring in Glenn from the Southampton podcast. Are you ready to join us?
Yeah.
Good evening, Glenn. How are you?
Very well. Thank you very much.
Good. I'm happy for you to join us tonight. Thank you for coming on. So, I've not watched many Southampton games. I've been too busy biting my fingernails at Leicester trying to win a few games. So ever since you got promoted with us, how do you rate your season compared to last season?
Well, I mean, it's comparing apples and oranges. You know it's going to be completely different when you come up to the Premier League. I mean, we haven't got short enough memories that we can't remember what it was like. We were there the last time. The last time we were in the Premier League, we got relegated pathetically. We only won maybe 5, maybe 6 games all season, only won 2 at home. So we were under no illusions that it was going to be very difficult. It's more difficult now coming up from the Championship with the amount of money that you can't spend. And we obviously came up through the playoff. We had less time than everybody else. It's a normal story that's happened to a lot of teams. So it's been very difficult. There are some things that I certainly do not like about being in the Premier League. But we had the debate, as I'm sure you guys did, like halfway through last season. Do we really want to go back to the Premier League? As competitive people, you've got to strive for that. And when you're there, like we are now, you just want your team and your manager to make the best of it. And if we go down, we go down. But I want us to be at least having a decent shout of staying up. I just don't. When we got relegated 2 years ago, it was obvious we were going down from about January.
Yeah.
So, those last 5 months are dreadful, really, really painful. I know your guys' experience was slightly different because you only really fell into the bottom 3, pretty close to the end, even though the season obviously wasn't great. But no, so far the season, Saints we've played well in bits of games. We played very well against Manchester United for half an hour, but ended up missing a penalty, and then everything went wrong, and the roof fell in. Lost that one.
Would you say Arsenal would be your best performance? I think you gave Arsenal a good.
Arsenal was the most surprising performance because the previous game to that, Bournemouth away, was probably one of the worst games in living memory. That first half, we were just shocking, and one of the issues we've had this season is obviously we've got a manager who's never managed at the Premier League level before, so he's learning as time goes on. And Bournemouth was a big step backwards because he tried to be sort of too clever and play without a striker and all that, and that never works. And consequently, we got stuffed by Bournemouth, and so we went to Arsenal thinking, we're going to get beat 6 or 7 here, but Leicester actually showed a couple of weeks prior that you can go to Arsenal and have a bit of a go, and you guys came very close to getting something, and we came pretty close ourselves, and that was kind of a blueprint of how we need to play. I think we were a little bit tighter in that game, certainly for the first sort of 60 or 70 minutes. Actually took the lead, which I think annoyed them a little bit, but we didn't handle the being in front. And that's one of my criticisms of the way Saints play. Saints have got a very defined style of play in that we try and play out from the back all the time. I kind of feel that when you go 1-0 up in a game, you need to change your tactics a little bit and just make sure you stay solid for 10, 15 minutes or so. But unfortunately, we gave the ball away in midfield, and you can't afford to do that against teams like Arsenal, and you end up, 2 passes later, and they've equalised, and then it becomes very, very difficult. So overall, there've been encouraging parts of the season, parts of games, but we haven't strung it together for a full 90 minutes yet. Our game where we should have won was against Ipswich, where we did play pretty well for the majority of the game, and it sounds pretty similar to your game against Bournemouth, actually, in that, but you got over the line. That's the difference. Whereas we let in the 95th minute deflected equaliser. So, just having that one win puts a completely different complexion on things. And, you guys are talking about, win on Saturday and you'll move up into 13th place or whatever. Whereas if you'd drawn that game against Bournemouth last week, it would have been a completely different outlook. So it's, I'm relatively optimistic at the moment because with the season being very, very new, and like yourselves by the sound, I don't know what your fixtures are, by the way, but 3 of our next 4 games are Leicester, Everton, Wolves. So there are points to be had there, but on the other side of the coin, of course, if we don't get many points from those games, then it does look very, very difficult going into Christmas.
I think some would agree that we've been more fortunate with our results. We've picked up more draws and we've got a win. So we've got, we're higher the table than you. But our teams are quite similar in terms of we're both struggling to find form and a relatively some sort of good, formation and style of football which works. We haven't played a full 90 minutes of good football. We've played half an hour of amazing football, but then the rest of it is just luck or, and being unfortunate. We've not had a full 90 minutes. So what do you think, Simon, Leicester need to do in order to have a good performance against Southampton and maintain a full 90 minutes of good football?
I think, just listening to Glenn, it sounds like our fortunes so far this season have been quite similar. We've played well in spells in games and not actually managed to put a full 90 minutes out there. I mean, it was like the Alamo against Bournemouth in the second half, how we kept them out. I mean, they scored and it was given offside for a really innocuous thing that, if it was the other way around, you'd be fuming. But, what have we got to do? I'll tell you what we've got to do. We've got to lay a performance down for 90 minutes, Jonno. And for me, Cooper has got to be more trusting in the squad, more committed to a game plan, and more aggressive in the way he sends a team out. Send a team out to win. Don't send a team out just not to get beat. And there's been too many times for me, my opinion, this season, where Steve Cooper sent out a team not to get battered, and that doesn't win you football matches. That keeps you in games by 1 or 2 goals. And for me, the games, Glenn, just so you know, we've got now yourself, a Forest, and then Ipswich. And whilst I know Forest are obviously having a decent season this season, they're not a top half side, I would suggest, longer term. And that kind of nucleus of 3 games, and I think Jonno and many other fans are on the same page with me with this, is a litmus test now for Cooper and where we're going to end up this season. If we end up coming out of this little spell of games, having beat Bournemouth with only that 3 points, I think alarm bells will be going off at the club. So for me, it's about having some belief, some passion, and really setting our stall out to go and win a game of football.
We have to. I think after the Bournemouth win, we need to go into the next spell of fixtures with positivity. And I think this for me, as we said before we went on live, this is where I'll judge Cooper. I think I'm not going to say Cooper out. I think Cooper's done well not to get thrashed every game. We've got points. We've seen out draws. We've got a win. But this is where I think Cooper is really tested. He's had an international break. He's had a chance to. Not many of our players, went to international break, had time to think things through. I think it's really important for us to get back to winning ways. So it's all about consistency now. We need to maintain that with Southampton. Now, with the Leicester fan base, Cooper is a lot of his negative. It's very, Cooper out, negative. So is that the same thing with Southampton, Glenn? Are the fans turning against the manager? Is it like do or die against Leicester? What's the fan base with Southampton like?
I think I think in the main, I mean, you can never cater for the fringes. There are always going to be people. Even last season when we were doing well, there was a lot of fans who kind of made up their mind straight away that they didn't like Russell Martin, they didn't like his style of play, and it didn't matter what we did. I mean, we lost a couple of games in the Championship last year, and people were, and people were wanting him gone, sort of thing. But obviously, it all went right in the end, and that buys you, that buys you a bit of time. Obviously, getting promoted, it's one of the best days in our history getting promoted in the playoff final. So, but it's the nature of top level sport that you've got to learn quickly. You've got to realise what you can do, what you can't do. And I think Russell Martin has been guilty at times this season of not knowing what his best team is, for starters. We've gone, I think we've had 3 or maybe even 4 formations. Sometimes we tried to be a little bit too clever. Like I say, this playing with no striker thing. We had a home game against Nottingham Forest where we basically played. He'll say we played with 2 strikers, but they were both out on the wings. There was no one central. So the Forest central defenders just, they could just do what they like. And then he repeated that against Bournemouth, played with no central strikers. So, and I think we've done it 4 times now, including games in pre-season, and haven't scored. So that's the sort of thing that drives you nuts. So after the Bournemouth game, I'd like to think of myself as quite sort of like reasonable, pragmatic. I've been around the block a few times watching this lot, so I kind of try and keep calm about things. But that Bournemouth game was so ridiculously stupid, going into that game playing no strikers, and then continuing to play no strikers when we let in a couple of goals. That just sort of did my head in. Arsenal game restored a bit of faith. There was a bit more pride shown by the players, and to give out the cliche, we go again. But it's got to the stage now where we have to get some wins, and he knows that. And I think I briefly had a quick look at his press conference today, and it's like, this is as good a game as any. And he's right, but I think there will be a lot of, if we get beat by Leicester, there will be another chunk of the fan base who get slightly disenfranchised with him, and the home game after that is Everton, and it's always really the home games that set the mood of the fan base. So if we have another couple of poor games against teams who are bottom 6 teams, let's face it, it's going to get progressively more difficult for the manager, and no amount of goodwill built up from last season is going to, is going to do the job, because it's a business at the end of the day, and we've got an owner who's already seen us get relegated once, and he'll be very keen not to see a large number of zeros wiped off the value of his investment if we look like going down again. But then the other side of the coin is, if you change manager, who do you get?
That's it. The market's small. When we didn't sack him. Enzo abandoned ship. It was a very small pit of managers that will come, because we didn't just have a club. We had a club that was in disarray with a points deduction looming and transfer embargoes. So we were very heavily linked with Graham Potter, but then we got linked with Cooper, and everyone will think, we didn't have the luxury of keeping the manager we came up with. If Enzo's stuck, I think everyone would have given him way more time and patience because of what he did. But Cooper doesn't have that luxury. He came into a side that just got promoted, and he's had to change style of football, he's got different players to what we would have expected. So I think it's a different kind of relationship with us and Cooper than you with your manager, because we didn't have that relationship of promotion with him. So I think Leicester fans are much more easy to go at his throat than you would, because you've got that memory of getting promoted with him.
I think you touched on it earlier. I think I don't think I'm out of order saying a lot of Leicester fans have probably got slightly more expectation now. That comes from you've won trophies in the last 10 years, so everyone can remember you winning the Premier League, winning FA Cup and all that sort of stuff. So European games and stuff like that. So I think the expectations are naturally a little bit higher, particularly amongst probably younger fans. So maybe that plays into the fact that there's not been a lot of patience with with Cooper, and the fact he came from Forest as well, it probably doesn't help. Yeah, I don't know, but I was surprised at the amount. I mean, Twitter or X, whatever it's called this week, is not the best barometer sometimes of fan opinion. But I was surprised to see the amount of sort of anti-Cooper sentiment after 4 or 5 games. But that's the modern world, and that's Premier League football, I'm afraid.
It is. I've just got a really good question from Joe in the comments. I'm going to aim this at Simon first, then go to you, Glenn. So we've talked about our managers. We're struggling at the moment, both of us, with trying to get points. So what do you think the ceiling is, Simon, for Leicester? What do you think, there's 2 sides, your head and your heart. What do you believe could happen we can reach, or what do you think logically we can do this season with the team and manager we have?
I think I can only answer that question by saying that hinges on us collectively finding an identity football-wise again as a club. I think when you talk about kind of Southampton and Leicester's fortunes, we both went up obviously in the summer. The difference for us at Southampton is, in my perception, and Glenn, please correct me if you think I'm wrong, is that the Martin obviously has got that continuity with that squad. He's got that understanding with that group of players. So you would kind of naturally think that he'll try and continue the good work he did last season, this season in the Premier League. Whereas for us, we've had to, as you said, Jonno, we've had to completely throw all of that out, because when Maresca decided he wanted to bail to Chelsea, he took all of the coaches with him as well. We've had to go completely back to ground zero over the summer and rebuild from scratch with a manager that clearly, naturally doesn't want to play the same way that Enzo Maresca did last season. So for me, that the only way I can answer that is that if Cooper can establish an identity with that group of players and start to formulate, and as Glenn was alluding to about Martin maybe not knowing his best 11, I'm pretty convinced that Cooper right now doesn't know his best 11 either, and he's tinkering with midfield and he's playing around with the wide players a bit. The only part of it that seems to be settled at the minute is the goalkeeper and the back 4. The rest of it is being played with. And Vardy, obviously, who's played almost all the games. So, for me, if we can do that and he can identify a formula, then I think lower mid-table is possible. With that, I think that group of players is good enough for that. But if we keep fumbling around in games trying to find an identity, then I think we'll throw too many points away to even hope for that.
It's just strange how we've brought in these 2 cams. I thought, we've brought in, I can't even going to pronounce their names. We brought in a loanee from Brighton, who's been, I think he's been our best player of the season. I think he's been absolutely immense. But it seems one some games we play Edouard on the wing and we'll play Ayew on the wing, when I'm thinking we've got Mavididi and Fataru, who last season were unbelievable. But yeah, we're not playing them on the wing. So some of his decisions, I think, have been questionable, which can affect how far we can get up the table. But once he finds that formula, which he needs to do quickly, I think we can get up to mid to bottom mid, if you know what I mean, part of the table. Same with you, sorry, Glenn. What if you can see all the players you have and the manager's potential, where do you see yourself finishing?
Well, the whole club this year, and we know this for a fact, has been, the aim is to finish 17th. It is just to stay up. We're very much seeing it as, first season back, you've got to stay up any way, anyhow, and then you can build on that in the second season, and you emulate teams like Bournemouth, who've been there a few years, like Brighton, who've sort of come up and been there a few years, Brentford. But that first season is always where it starts. So I think Saints are very much looking at it as, we try and finish 17th, and if I'm optimistic, 16th. honestly, there's no more expectation than that, and even if these 4 games coming, obviously Man City away is a write-off, but even, for example, by some miracle, if we got 9 points from the other 3 games, we'd probably be about 10th in the league. But the aim would still be to finish, 17th, and make sure we stay up this season. I certainly don't have any expectations any more than that, even though they invent European competitions every year, and it seems to come down lower and lower in the league. So I don't think
we know it.
I don't think either team will be bothering to look at where the dotted lines are on the table, apart from the relegation line by the end of the season. So
we come up towards the end of the show. Obviously, we need to discuss how we think the game's going to at the weekend. The crunch game, 3 o'clock kickoff. No, it's not on TV, so we have to find some ways of watching the game. You can all provide your own way, but it's going to be a very tough game. I think it's going to be a cagey game. I think it's going to be, it's not going to be like we beat Southampton 9-0 or 4-1 or any of the previous ones we've beat Spurs at. But I think it's going to be a much more cagey affair than previous years. So my prediction would probably be, I think, 2-1 to Leicester. And I think it's going to be down to who starts off well. As you said earlier, Glenn, it's how you start games and continue in it. If you start a game really bad or really well and you continue, you don't want to set the tone for the game. So I think if Leicester start well and we get 1 or 2 goals, I think we can maintain the win. What about you, Glenn? What do you think for the weekend?
Well, whenever I'm notoriously bad at score predictions and things like that, and I've got to the stage now this season where I'm just sort of like manifesting wins. So I'm going to predict it to win no matter what. I do think after the Arsenal game we showed that we are capable in that game of being a decent side if we string everything together. There was a definite change in there. I mean, we did play a centre forward in that game, lad called Ross Stewart, who we signed last season. Unfortunately, he got injured and had to go off. But Cameron Archer scored, which was for one of our strikers to get a goal. That will hopefully get him up and running. And we saw there's a guy that we signed midway through the relegation season called Paul Onuachu, who's 6'8", massive guy, striker. He kind of became a bit of a joke player, and we loaned him out last year. He went to Turkey and he scored a lot of goals in Turkey, and he's come back and he's gone from sort of 5th choice striker at the start of the season to there's a very good chance he starts the game on Saturday, because apparently his attitude's been first class and he's got himself back into contention. So that will make us a different proposition, because one of the problems we've had this year is making the ball stick up front, and we play a lot around in midfield, and then we've got nothing to, we end up trying to bounce the ball into the forwards, and it just comes back and gets defended, and we kind of lose our way. So I'm hoping he starts just to give us a slightly different dimension to hopefully make us more dangerous going forward, because I think we've only scored, is it 2 goals all season, 2 or 3? It's not great.
2 or 3 goals all season.
Yeah. It's been pretty poor. So I'm hoping that we've been spending the international break sort of like working on that. We've had the emergence of a young lad you probably heard of, Tyler Dibbling, who's come out of the academy team, and he's been our best attacking player. So that shows really the difference between the Championship and the Premier League, because all the forwards that we had last year scored lots of goals. Che Adams moved on. Adam Armstrong really, really struggles at Premier League level. So that's the area that we knew we were going to struggle in, and it would be some story, for us if Paul Onuachu turns out to be the guy who turns it around. So I'm relatively optimistic that we'll pose more of an attacking threat than we have done, and that's why I'll repeat your score, but the other way around, I'll go for a 2-1 win for us.
What about you?
We won't keep a clean sheet.
Well, don't worry, Glenn, because nor will we, mate.
We won't keep it clean. We need to score more than you.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is another heart and head weekend. My heart obviously is saying we win. My head, reading the stats, listening to Glenn this evening, understanding that I think Southampton had a very similar season to us in terms of they've been in games for spells but have struggled to get that performance up for the 90 minutes. It's got draw written all over it for me, and that's where my head sits. Score draw, take your pick, 1-1, 2-2, somewhere in there. The only part of me that's a little bit jumpy is that I'm sure the Southampton fans and players will be thinking this is our golden opportunity to get our first win of the season.
Yeah, absolutely, and they have to think that way. You know, they have to think that way because, towards Christmas we have a bit of a nightmare run of fixtures. You know, Liverpool and all that lot, and you go into those games thinking, well, this is going to be incredibly difficult to get a point. And obviously, there's no easy games in the Premier League, but some are easier than others. You know, there's no denying that. So you've got to look at games. You know, even though obviously you won the league last year, you beat us twice. So games against Leicester, Everton, Wolves, they've got to be seen as point scoring opportunities, and you just hope that that's been drilled into the players. And it's interesting what you said about Steve Cooper and sending out your team in a positive way to go and win a game, as opposed to stay in it. That's exactly what the mindset has to be for us in these 3 games. The season we got relegated, to be honest, I mean, we actually won at your place, but we played so many teams that were out of form before we played them. And in those sort of games, you're supposed to, you really need to go at it and try and put them under pressure straight away. And we didn't, conceded a goal, and then we did nothing. And that there was too many of those games, and you can't afford to be like that at Premier League level. You have to pose some sort of attacking threat, otherwise it just becomes too easy for the opposition to keep you out. And I'm just sort of, it's not last chance saloon, obviously, because it's only October, but we need to start soon, because otherwise you're going to get into getting cut adrift and changing managers and all that sort of stuff. And we don't particularly want to get into that.
No, definitely not. So you're predicting a 2-1, Glenn. I'm predicting a 2-1 to Leicester. And what's your score, Simon?
I'll go for a 2-2 draw, Jonno.
Not Desmond. No. You've got to go for a win, Leicester, surely. We've been there 9-0.
It's easy for me just to sit here with my heart and go, oh, we'll win on Saturday. I'm sorry. I've got to think with my head. If you look at the stats, you look at the way the two teams have played, in and out of games, both teams will have spells in the game, I would imagine. It's got draw written all over it for me. I'm sorry.
That's fair enough. Now, we've discussed our games. Just quick, obviously, before we go, international break, no club football at all. But there was big news. We've got a new England manager in Thomas Tuchel. Scott put up a really good comment saying thoughts on the improving international manager who couldn't get Kane to win a trophy at club level. So he's talking about Kane at Bayern Munich. He couldn't get them to win a trophy. So what are your thoughts on the new assignment? I think it's a really good change. I think Tuchel's a man who's going to put the egos down and put a team out to win.
If I'm honest, Jonno, I was starting to worry about the Carsley experiment. That seems to be going a little bit wrong.
That's similar to the Saints thing, like putting out a team with no striker and hoping for the best. That's what I relate to.
Yeah, I mean, the first group of games that he had, it looked really positive, and all of the pundits on the TV were like, this guy's going to get the job, and it's going to be another one that's going to get promoted out of the 21s. And then we had that game against Greece, and you're like, oh, this is not pretty at all. It's probably one of the worst England performances I've ever seen.
It was horrific.
I think Carsley knew all along that he wasn't getting the job. I think he knew that. I think they were interviewing in the background, and poor Lee Carsley was being sent out in front of the media after all of those games and having to make polite excuses for his future, which must have put him in a bit of a spot. Thomas Tuchel's got 18 months now to win the World Cup, apparently. It's a short-term contract, which I like, because that means if this is an abject failure, there's not a fortune to pay out to get rid of someone, and it's all focused around this World Cup that comes and getting qualified firstly, obviously, and then apparently winning it. I think there's a bit of a culture shock coming for Thomas Tuchel, because in all of the press things I've seen him do since he's been appointed, he's lamented about he likes to deal with the players every day, likes to be with the players every day. Well, I've got news for him. He's going to be sitting watching games in stadiums for most of his job. And he'll get maybe 4 or 5 days at best with the players to formulate a system and a team selection to get him out on the pitch. I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't appoint him sooner, because he doesn't come in until the new year. And these Nation League games in November would have been a good chance for him to make his mistakes, for want of a better way of putting it, and figure things out. But apparently his backroom staff can't start till next year, which is why he won't take the job till then. I wish him the best. I personally prefer an English manager for the England football team. I'm not a massive fan of foreign managers. Hasn't worked in the past. He'll get the respect of the players because of his credentials. He's won the Champions League and the Premier League and da-da-da-da-da. So he's going to get that respect. But the jury's out. I'm open-minded to him coming in and taking what is a great group of young players in the England squad and going and winning a trophy.
What about your thoughts?
The very first thing I thought was that it had shades of Fabio Capello about it, and that we've brought in a manager who's been ridiculously successful, at some of the biggest clubs in Europe. And Tuchel and Capello are both the same in that regard. Tuchel has the advantage is that he's actually managed in England before, obviously his spell with Chelsea. But that's a worst case scenario, because obviously Capello was a bit of a disaster when we got to the tournament in 2010. So I was a bit surprised at how sort of like speedily it was handled. Suddenly it's just sort of got announced out of nowhere, wasn't it? There wasn't even time for the rumour mill to get going. And, there were lists with people like Eddie Howe on there and things like that. But I don't think that was ever feasible.
Well, never going to get Pep.
Pep's not happening. Obviously, Jurgen Klopp was mentioned and people like that. So I agree with what you said about the short-term contract. I kind of feel that if we're just talking about one tournament, it's probably as good as they could have got. And he obviously wants to do the job. I don't particularly have a problem with him being from overseas. That's every time there's a World Cup on, there's always an African team that does well, and it's always managed by a Belgian or a Frenchman, and the lines on nationality in international football are so blurred these days, with people playing for Wales because their grandmother went there once, and things like that. So it's not like every player is, for England is a dyed-in-the-wool Englishman. Everyone's from somewhere else originally, and so that sort of thing really doesn't bother me. It does annoy a lot of people, and I just find that amusing, I'm afraid. And I find it quite sad that they're not talking about, why can't he start till January? What they are talking about is, will he sing the national anthem? I don't care.
I don't care. Just
win some games. Win the games. Look like England's going in the right direction. So So I agree. The Lee Carsley experiment, the wheels came off with that Greece game, big time. But as you say, I don't think it was ever realistic. I don't feel that having seen him interviewed, I don't feel like he ever really wanted the job. He wanted to go back to the under-21s and carry on with what he's doing there. And fair enough, fair play to him. He got. But if you're offered the opportunity to run the national team for six games or whatever it is, then you can't blame him for wanting to have a go. So no, full steam ahead, and hopefully Mr. Tuchel sorts the egos out and gets things right. But he's going to have a very short rope with regards to the press in this country. Yes. So best of luck to him.
I just think I think he's a strong personality, and instead of being hugged and with hot chocolate, it's going to be a different ball game for those players. It's going to be different atmosphere. It's going to be more aggressive with the players, demand more for the players, which I think was what we need. I think Harsley just went, F it, I'm going to show you the public what you would have got if Southgate played all the players you wanted in the team, and this is what you got. It was absolute rubbish. So he said all players can't play. You got to leave people behind, and I think that's what Tuchel will do. If he doesn't like a player, he's not contracted him to play him. He won't bring him, which I think is what we need. But no, that's the end of the show. Thank you so much, Glenn, for coming on. If you want to hear more about Southampton and his views, go to this Total Saints podcast, really good podcast where all things Saints. So if you want to hear more different views about the Leicester game coming up against Southampton, go to their channel. Thank you, Simon, for coming on, giving your thoughts about the Leicester game. Really, really good to have you on. So thank you both for coming on. I'm just going to drop you out. Thank you both for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Jonno. Take care, mate.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for watching. Really, really appreciate it. We've got watch along at the weekend. We could all come along and, join us for the watch along. Really good game. Hopefully we'll get the win, but thank you so much for everyone for joining on. We'll see you soon. Come on, you Foxes.